welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I am your host, Mookie Spitz, and the one with ambition today is Ivor. He is a millennial, and I thought I'd bring him on as perfect complement to Hannah, who was a Gen Z Zoomer whom I spoke with in our last episode, and she shared the trials and tribulations of a young person entering today's transactional, almost Darwinian market. So I thought I'd bring Ivor on as a generation prior to describe some of his own challenges in today's business climate and to share with us his experiences being a millennial. I'm a boomer, and I grew up with the notion that my life would be better and I would be richer than my parents. That's more or less been true, but that illusion and that trajectory has pretty much been shattered with the millennials continuing into the Zoomer generation. Stat I just read, millennials endure about 40% of the net worth of their own parents at that point in their career. So, welcome aboard, Ivor. Thank you for making time. I'm eager to hear your point of view about today's crazy business world and your journey through it.
Thank you for having me on, Mookie. It's great to be here. And so a quick summary of myself and my professional career. I'm currently living in Chicago. I work 100% digitally from home with benefits, good pay, vacation, whatnot. I have a degree in history from Northeastern Illinois University, which I never used for anything relating to history at all, but it has definitely been a good tool for navigating through the professional world. And degrees definitely do help, but you also have to put in the work. And so in today's world, I kind of realized, even though they used to say, keep the business and the family separate, business like in Godfather, it was business, nothing personal. But in today's fast-paced world, you often find yourself putting your professional and your social life together in one because of all the networking that's coming up today and whatnot.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you are 100% virtual. You never go
Yes.
into the office. Is that correct?
Yep, only for parties like a Christmas party. And one time when I had to switch my laptop out, never go into
Oh,
the office. Nope.
okay. And then you mentioned that you're a history major, but your current career has nothing to do with history.
Yep,
What is
absolutely nothing.
in broad strokes? What is your specialty? What it is that you do?
I work in grants management. Without disclosing too much, it has to do a lot with subsidies, and we mainly where I work at, we're dealing with rehabilitation centers and whatnot, places such as halfway homes, counseling, and getting people back on their feet. Some vocational programs. We're basically just on the money end of it, so kind of what you would say a virtual paper pusher, since there's no physical paper anymore. It's all digital.
And is it a private firm or do you work for the government?
It's government, yes.
Okay, so this is doubly fascinating.
Yes.
In this age of Doge, are you worried about the frailty of your position now, especially given how it sounds like it's in public service?
Well, I'm a state employee, so I'm not directly affected by the feds for now. We do, there is obviously work between the feds and the states, but I have nothing to do with that part. But as of now, no, nobody seems, and we're also unionized, so
Okay, and you are in Chicago, I believe you mentioned. Is that
that is
right?
correct. Yep, the Windy
Okay,
City.
so you are in a ostensibly blue state, and you're a
Yes.
state employee, and
Yeah.
you work.
Well, yes.
Okay,
Blue state, but on a county level, Illinois is much more red, if not purple.
That is true. Chicago is this island of blue, but because of its heavy population density, it tips the entire state
It
Democrat.
it does indeed, yes. With few exceptions, an often forgotten election, Obama's '04 Senate election against Alan Keyes. He won all but 10 counties in Illinois, which is very rare. Normally, it's a sea of red with a few blue islands. But he actually did very well in that election by reaching out, going more into those towns. So those small counties, the fish fries and whatnot. So I'd say very purple.
Yeah,
It's
and you also illustrate how much the scale is tipped in the other direction
Mhm.
since the days of Obama.
Oh, definitely. Even I remember reading in one interview, he said when he was just a state senator and when he would go to rural Illinois towns, he said, these are my people too. I'm half Scotch Irish. And
Indeed. So there you have it. I believe Chris Rock had a hysterical sketch where he was saying that he wanted to vote for the white candidate and therefore he cast his vote for Barack Obama. So anyway, but times, of course, have changed.
yes, very much.
I'd like to talk about those changing times through the lens of your experience. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm actually a cusp boomer. I'm 1964.
Hmm.
And I believe millennials are 81 to 96, and I'm
Yes.
assuming you're in that range.
91. Yep. Last year,
Okay.
the Soviet Union existed. When I was born, that was still a thing, not anymore.
That's right. That's right. Times have indeed changed. So, as I mentioned, even being a cusp boomer, I was born into an environment of almost a teleological trajectory of things getting better. It was
Yes.
tacitly assumed that things would get better. I am the son of emigre parents. My parents are
Hmm.
Hungarians by way of Venezuela, and I had a bit of the emigre thing or pathos attached to me too, and then with it comes even
Hmm.
higher expectations of living the American dream. So how can you describe in a sense the gap between your expectations of yourself at this point in your life and where you are now, and how that delta shakes out in terms of what you're seeing around you among your peers in the business environment and the like?
Well, where I am right now is at present, I have my own place. I'm working a comfortable job. I have friends, a car. I socialize a lot. You know, it's it's pretty much it's a good spot. Although when I was younger, like let's say when I was a teenager, and I had ambitions, I remember one of my biggest dreams once I wanted to be an engineer, but I wasn't very good at the mathematical portion of it. And I always imagined, by my mid 30s, I'd have a big house and a family and, slowly getting there. But still, when I was even a few years younger, I was thinking, man, this is not where I imagined myself to be because what I did learn was the path to career is very difficult. And in school, they sort of implied that, oh, you're going to go to college and then there's a career waiting right thereafter. But no, you actually have to put in the work, but they're not going to tell you how to do it. So there's a lot of figuring out. And I'm fortunately, I was a slow learner for a while. I hate to admit it, but
Well, it sounds like a lot of the attitudes that were underpinnings for my generation
Mhm.
cascaded into your generation as well, and with that expectation. Tell me a little bit about your peers, especially the male peers that you have in terms of riding this generational wave. Are they happy? Are they mad? We read a lot and we hear a lot about the lost generation of
Mhm.
American males, about
Yes.
masculinity, toxic masculinity, and basically men being much more lost and disempowered, as women have been surging in success and influence and self-empowerment.
Very much so.
So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about some of your peers and what you're seeing in terms of their struggles too.
Well, with their struggle, and as I mentioned before in some of our convos, I'm a little bit on the autism spectrum, but high functioning. So I pretty much go through life on autopilot in many cases. As I got older, it became easier. But the struggle, I think, for a lot of men is this idea that men don't have an inherent value like women or children, that men have to earn their value. And from a very early age, men like me, we were exposed to the manliest stuff imaginable. We were watching Arnold and Sylvester Stallone. We were watching Attitude Era wrestling and all these action movies, Fast and Furious, whatnot. And a lot of men were given these archetypes to live up to that just they couldn't live up to. And gradually that ended up turning into the dude bro culture, the gamer culture. I actually remembered, I got to watch a lot of men my age desocialize around last quarter century, I would say, when PlayStation 2 and Xbox came out, when Sony and Microsoft, the big tech corporations, got into the business and made games that you couldn't beat in 2 hours like the old Nintendo and Segas. Now the game became immersive. Then you got those MMORPGs. So what I saw with a lot of men my age is they got sucked kind of into the matrix, like the movie itself says, where they're mostly on the internet, in game worlds, in some sort of online interconnected fantasy, which isn't very real. And they might have a professional life, but literally no social life. A lot of men I see, especially now, it's just their social life has evaporated. And I kind of felt like that during the pandemic, and I had to struggle very hard to get back into it. But I think that is a big part of it. It's just there's been so much desocialization this past quarter century with social media, video games, everything. I got to watch it happen in real time. And I think all these factors just came together, and it didn't have a very good reaction in the end.
Yeah, that's fascinating and is reinforced by a lot of the data that we pick up on and a lot of the opinions from experts who ostensibly put the blame on this problem of this digitization, the matrix, as you say,
Yes.
that has overwhelmed an entire generation, especially men.
Hmm.
Video games is a male dominant exercise.
Very much so. I feel the exit ramp for girls was around that generation I mentioned, Generation 6, Xbox, PlayStation. At that point, it became, girls used to like to play Super Mario with us, but then they were like, okay, we're going to do this. But guys just stuck with the games and almost never outgrew it. I outgrew video games around age 14, 15. But some people I know now are in their 30s and 40s and still playing 15 hours a day. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that reinforces what we've been hearing,
Mhm.
and it puts it into stark contrast with the trajectory of women, younger women, females who didn't have this magnet of the matrix. And it's interesting that you describe that the cutoff is really where these immersive, complex, cinematic role playing games took over the lives of young men
Yes.
and, in a sense, liberated women to pursue real world activities such as get an education and learn interpersonal skills. Right?
Basically, yes. And when you would tell men about that, it's like, guys, aren't you playing games a little too long? They reply smugly with, not enough. We need to play more.
So,
Okay. Leaves
Right.
plenty of room for women to do more stuff since you're at home playing World of Warcraft or whatever.
Yeah, and this has had its implications with women who excel. Right now, I believe women are predominant as undergraduates
Yep.
in universities and colleges.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
and I don't want to even use anecdotal evidence, but when I drive by Loyola in Chicago, you see like 6 or 7 women for every one male student there. It's bad.
and then the whiplash of this effect when
Hmm.
you have all these men who have really not picked up on interpersonal skills and communication. I know with my own kids, I have an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old, an atrophied trajectory of dating, a
Hmm.
sense of social isolation, even with them. And a lot of that was connected with their excessive video game usage also. And they're obviously the Gen Alpha crowd, the Gen Zer and the Gen Alpha.
Right.
So it seems endemic, and it seems
Yes.
to have really held generations of men, especially, back
Hmm.
because it's self-isolated them. So, so given this handicap, if you will, what compensatory strategies have you been using and did you use to finally land a career? And you sound like you're fairly self-actualized, so you're aware of your own ASD, at least
Yes.
to a certain extent,
Hmm.
and you don't let that inhibit your ability to succeed in society. Can you tell us a little bit about the initiative, the flexibility, the attitude that you bring to this difficult environment, especially given the fact that you were a gamer too for a while, it sounds like.
Yeah, just not a very good one. My mom only bought me a PlayStation 2, so if I wanted to play other games, it would be at a friend's house.
Right. So
But
your
I
mom
outgrew
perhaps
it.
did you a favor.
He did, yes. And when I got to high school, once I joined the swim team at your rival, Niles West, I didn't have time to play video games or watch cartoons or watch anime or anything anymore. And, then all that childhood stuff just simply, it timed out. But for a lot of guys, I guess it didn't time out.
So if I'm hearing you, a great way to move forward and overcome this millennial malaise
Hmm.
is it starts with unplugging. You sound like Neo
Yes.
from the Matrix, right? You got the first step is to unplug.
Hmm. Physically, yeah, unplug,
Mhm.
step out into the real world, because that was with me and dealing with other issues. Having ASD includes social anxiety. I used to be very shy, so I kind of adopted the Batman approach. Batman, he's afraid of bats, so he makes it his persona. Me, being shy, I decided to be more outgoing, outspoken, to face your fear every day, because that's an important matter. And just to look at the evolution, my first ever job interview, which was at a grocery store, I was pretty much just sitting there, listening to the managers tell me what I was going to be doing and saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. What else was I going to do? I had no experience. They were giving me my first opportunity. And then, whereas the last job interview I had, I think there were about a dozen other candidates. And that, when it comes to, you just got to ace the interview, you got to give a really good performance. It's all about performances. And, so I put on my best clothing, blue suit, had my hair done real nice. Made sure when I got on the video interview, they could see that I'm tall. I'm about 6'5". That helps, and answered all 8 questions with total confidence. Like for an hour, I basically had to emulate like I'm a Christian Bale and Alec Baldwin's character in Glengarry Glen Ross. Like I really do have their confidence, even though I don't. And that's a big part of it. You sometimes just have to work your way through it. What's wrong? You can't give a performance for 1 hour. How do people get elected to office? You got to give the performance, then deal with the problem later.
So it sounds like constraints that have been put
Hmm.
on you, namely
Yes.
the constraints of a spectrum personality,
Right.
which was something that you had to deal with,
Hmm.
and that engendered creativity
Yes.
and the risk of operating outside your comfort zones
Right.
created the reward of overcoming your fears and getting you out there into this terrifying world and ultimately landing you a good job. And it sounds like you've got a home and you're on your way.
Yes. And I did hit a few bumps along the way. Like when I moved from upstate New York back to Chicago, the first job I had at UIC was back office. It was a lot of paperwork. I didn't like it. It didn't work out. And so what I decided to do was I quit that job, got a job delivering pizzas for Lou Malnati's, and went back to finally finish my master's, which I had a semester left from years earlier. And I was able to, actually get back in doing that. I spoke to Professor Farzana, who'd been my professor of Middle Eastern history, and he was now director of the history department, and he endorsed me going back in because they had a policy: if you'd been gone for more than 6 years, you had to reapply and restart over. But I was like, no, I had one semester, I'm going to finish this. And it worked.
Congratulations. So
Thank you.
in addition to all this, it sounds like you're a student who took a sabbatical, as it
Yes.
were, and
Hmm.
then you returned to school and educated yourself,
Yes.
and then acquired the additional skills necessary to interview, to throw yourself out there to the point where you got hired and now
Oh,
you got a
definitely.
gig.
And my first, job, professional job, which was back in Albany, an office job, also in social services, I got that job mainly because, and, I wasn't even trying, but at the interview, I did make all four of the interviewers laugh. And they liked that very much because they offered me the job.
There you go. So it's knowing not only the social cues, but actually being able to engender some behavioral change yourself in
Oh,
terms
yeah,
of your
definitely.
your target. You influence them to make the right move for you.
Yes, and that's actually, how it reflects in real life. If you look at there were actually people who worked in the Obama White House who said that Veep, where Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the vice president, is a more realistic portrayal than like West Wing or House of Cards, which are overly dramatic. Because, in real life, come on, nobody is putting on a drama play 24/7. There's going to be a little humor, there's going to be a little give. You got to socialize with different types of people.
Yeah, it's more realistic than, let's say, Sorkin's high drama.
Right. Yes.
It, so reality, in a sense, is more banal and emotional.
Yes, very much so.
What's fascinating to me is that you exhibit many of the same qualities that your Gen Z Zoomer counterpart displayed when I spoke to her about what enabled her to survive and even flourish
Mhm.
under difficult circumstances. And some of the points of commonality include flexibility, open-mindedness, and an eagerness to learn new skills and be adaptive.
Very much so. And that was actually where mixing the social life and the professional life came in handy, such as in Albany. I befriended one director of a HEAP, which helps people out with their power and heating bills. And he invited me to a barbecue at his house on the weekend, which was just at the edge of Troy, New York. Beautiful little country home. We socialized, and he's a reference I can use the rest of my life. And so are about six or seven other executives from there who I befriended. I had a boss over there. I gifted him a deer antler that I found in the woods. He's a fan of hunting. And he's a good reference too. So really, that's one thing you have to do, and that's where they kind of threw us off when they were trying to say keep the business and the social separate. Well, millennials and I guess Gen Z, a lot of times we don't have a choice. It's not like that anymore. It's not how it may have been in the old world where you had a professional life and a personal life. Today, it's all about networking.
Yeah, yeah. Hannah, your Gen Z counterpart, also illustrated a fairly detailed list of all the erroneous things that she was taught in school from mentors and the like. One of which is stay in the same job for 10, 15 years to
Hmm.
demonstrate loyalty and commitment because otherwise no one will hire you. And her experience has been almost the opposite of picking up freelance roles where her employers have made her disposable and she's flipped it around to make
Hmm.
them disposable for her.
That's the way to
And
go.
yeah, yeah. So that's fascinating. And again, both of you are showing initiative within tough times, and the times are different and tougher in ways than what the older generations have been used to, where everything was more cut and dried, less frenetic, and then maybe a tad, I might even say, kinder at this point.
Oh yeah, definitely a tad kinder. And that's also why I do dabble in writing. I do hope to get published one day. I've written a lot at a college level and gotten good reviews with that. But yeah, it's a lot more. We do have to do a lot more. That is a definite with our work. That's why I also invest a little. We have to. It's not like even though I have a pension and a 401k, you still want to save a little more money up for yourself. It's just a lot more challenges for the future. And while we're building our future at the same time, we're facing, one road bump after another steadily, and some people just can't keep up with that. And I felt technology for me, technology for us, for my generation, for Z, I feel it did two things, and others have said this before. It either got people ahead or it left them behind. For me, it got me ahead because at my old office, we actually used to have old school and various those old school printing press type machines that were used for copying and fax machines, but now all that's gone. All that is much more easily automated, and there are still jobs that require physical work. There always will be, but for me it became easier. For a lot of people with degrees it became easier, and how to explain it to other people now is harder because they're like, well, so what? It's like, well, it's the technology. You can't really, you can't fight against it. You have to go with it. Otherwise, you get left behind. It's plain and simple.
Yeah, and it's the technology that has taken out the dude bros
Hmm.
from the jungle, marginalized them, is very much a similar kind of technology that is empowering people like yourself, people like Hannah, to take advantage
Very much
of
so.
of the environment. So speaking of environments, you have lived through quite a tumultuous change in our culture, in
Yes.
our politics,
Hmm.
and I try to keep these podcasts as nonpartisan as possible.
Right.
But can you share your view of how America has, in a sense, changed out from under you through the perspective of the millennial?
Mhm. Well, it goes in with what I previously said. There's those who moved forward and those who were left behind. And with millennials, I feel when it came to a lot of the guys, the men, many got left behind. They simply didn't didn't follow through. I used to also wonder, with older boomers, how did the hippies, become neocons? And then watching it in happening in real time, with your dude bros, your buddies you used to hang out with on the weekend and drink beers and whatnot. Kind of that lifestyle was not sustainable long term. It was fun for a while, but not long term. And a lot of them ended up becoming angry and turn to the right. I saw, but when a lot of times I hear those stories where they say, yeah, I switched because of the wokes or the SJWs, it's like, no, I knew who you were, and you made some bad decisions which beget more bad decisions. I did the same thing, but at some point I decided to start making some smarter ones as well, because anger will do a lot to a man. And when you really only have to blame yourself in a lot of situations. I can't honestly say there was any instance in my life that I did not cause by my own doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, a majority of the leadership of the country, at least in terms of time span through your life,
Yes.
arguably has been Democrat. And
Yes.
again, I'm speaking through a nonpartisan lens. I'm trying to understand how our values as a society impact business, impact our success in the world, and how leadership attributes trickle down into our culture. So the 90s was basically the era after the first Bush passed the baton, the Clinton era, which arguably was the American empire at its most successful. Our economy was stable. You had a president who very much catered to both sides of the aisle. So much of the welfare reform, criminal reform, NAFTA, which has now become synonymous with destroying America's manufacturing base,
Yes.
was a Clinton output.
Yes.
So Bill Clinton was, in a sense, the emperor of America at its height. And since then, it's obviously oscillated between parties, but it's been Democrat dominant fairly. And the dude bro malaise that you describe, uh, in a sense, happened under their watch. So what do you think went wrong? Why did all of these young men fall off the gravy train? We know that there was that Matrix component. They're plugged into their video games, but what do you think went wrong with leadership and business leaders to exacerbate this discrepancy between isolated, angry young men and empowered Barbies who are out there gunning it and eager to succeed?
Well, one thing I saw, and this was from my experience growing up till today, was when you have there's always kind of levels of work. There's the physical labor, which you go on Facebook and look at those memes, and they'll have the ones, oh yeah, thank you, man, because you're upwards of 90% of plumbers and carpenters and mechanics and whatnot. And that was one problem for a lot of the guys my age. I once remember senior year, I took a computer repair class, and it's literally all guys, like, and no girls were really interested in that kind of stuff at all. And so some men got more into that. They still couldn't, I feel, shake the whole idea, the whole hot rod, the Fast and the Furious kind of, and the consumption with action hero fantasies, and not to get too much into the Second Amendment, but the obsession with guns, that kind of tough guy power struggle, the desire to be an alpha male, which is like, what in God's name is an alpha male anyway? That's like a pseudoscience, but people
Well,
still want to live up to it.
well, yeah, and I think appeal to the alpha male has really propelled the new administration that is arguably this refabricated machismo at its core.
Very much so, because I mean, if 20 years ago, if I had told someone, that that Hulk Hogan was going to introduce the guy who appointed Macaulay Culkin to the lobby in Home Alone as the Republican presidential candidate, people would have said, I think you should go to an insane asylum. But that's literally what happened in real life. Hulk Hogan introduced Trump at the Republican National Convention. Ridiculous, right? But that is very much appealing to the dude bro thing, because Hulk Hogan is almost a personification, with his 24-inch guns, brother.
That was a pretty good. You could double up as VO for Duke Nukem too. Remember Duke
Yeah,
Nukem?
I remember
So
that.
yeah, so that I think is accurate on the pulse of the emergence of the Home Alone character as president of the United States. But what's your feeling about the other side? Because we're clearly enduring a backlash to the backlash.
Hmm.
How do you, and especially the dude bros, feel about what's now been characterized as quote unquote the woke, which is going out of one's way societally, governmentally, to give special treatment to special people to compensate for their systemic abuse over multiple generations? It's a way of helping the disadvantaged with I personally believe at its core the sincere belief that we want to level the playing field, but it's clearly backfired in a most extreme way with your dude bro Duke Nukem friends leading the charge in terms of reactivating what would otherwise be characterized as quote unquote toxic masculinity.
Right. Very much they're reactivating it in ways that are just when you look at it, it's almost like a state of suspended adolescence. It reminds me of that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that everyone forgets about, Last Action Hero, because it was out at the same time as Jurassic Park, which pretty much drowned the box office the second half of '93. But I actually think of the kid in the movie. I think the actor who played him is a millennial, born '81 or '82, and how he's kind of just skipping school. He has no friends. He's living his action hero fantasies, and he's just watching movies in the theater. And I feel like that kid became what a lot of millennial men would turn into, uh, antisocial, action hero fantasy, and very misanthropic ultimately. Because when you think about it, that's just a very selfish way to fantasize about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing that movie. I remember I was on a date, and we had both concluded that the movie was actually more entertaining and better than Jurassic Park. But to your point, Jurassic Park annihilated the film in at the box office. But
Yes.
its title is prescient as well, which is the last action hero. There's the feeling that the millennial dude bro is that last action hero. And now they have their fearless leader who is making America great again and bringing back that action hero who was doomed to the mortuary of American culture and life, right?
Yep. Very much.
It was done, and it's been revitalized because there's been a fail. And I think your observation that there's an atrophying of the maturation process is a big part of it. Because if you refuse to grow up, then you're going to want a kind of revolution of the teenage boy,
Yes.
and I think we're seeing that in many ways. What is the antidote to it from your millennial point of view? Because in another 10 years, you will enter that mythical land of the middle-aged male,
Hmm. Yes.
and the country will be yours in a sense. So what is the antidote to this whiplash to the whiplash? And how can we kind of claw our way out of this recidivist kind of infantilism?
And well, that's, a good question. And to go towards an answer, I would say I don't have one whole answer. A lot of times I've noticed you have to confront these problems head on, such as a lot of guys like that now, especially dude bros, Trump voters, have pretty much been socially ostracized. Everyone they knew, by and large, has cut them off. And when you try talking to them, and trying to tell them you got to get your own life together, start dressing better, be mindful of your appearance. You have to take personal responsibility, kind of like what JD Vance, to give him a little credit going back when he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, he was basically telling, his people, Appalachian Scotch Irish folk, hey, get an education, clean up, you can do better. You don't have to be stuck like this. But that takes a lot of self reflection. It takes admitting to yourself, okay, I'm doing something wrong. I have to start doing something right. And with some people, they do listen. And one buddy of mine who is ready to give up on dating because he'd gotten thousands of rejections on those apps, which I still have yet to use. I said, you got to keep going, man. Got to keep with that persistence like a guerrilla fighter. Just keep it going because eventually you are going to win. And, he got a date the other day. He's got a second one coming next week. And he's had a rough few years since his divorce and whatnot. So, you could take people on head on, and some people are willing to listen. Others, I give them advice, but they look at me like I'm an adult from Charlie Brown. Mwop, mwop, mwop. Mindful of your appearance. Mwop, mwop, mwop. Responsibility.
Yeah, which also sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher
Yep.
when just wah wah wah, which is an appropriate segue, and I'm glad you brought up good old JD
Mm-hmm.
because he's the hillbilly who's now vice president,
Right.
and the tune is the same, but the tune has changed. So he was about self-actualization and empowerment. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps,
Yep.
educate yourself, be flexible, and go for it. And now there is, in a sense, an inverted looking glass expression of that in terms of even Elon Musk's initiative, the Doge,
Mm-hmm.
where we're going to take a Darwinian slash and burn to reduce the size of the bureaucracy and then allegedly the debt.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that we've been characterizing this conversation as Trump and the Make America Great Again as a boogeyman and an expression of the protracted adolescence of the dude bro.
Yeah.
But there's other aspects to this where the debt is legitimately existentially
Mm-hmm.
large,
Yes.
and America has made critical blunders both internally neglecting the working class and externally in terms of foreign policy where we've gotten ourselves into bloody, expensive, pointless wars.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a general reevaluation of what America is, why we do what we do, and it's time to shake stuff up.
It is.
So how do we connect the dots and put a bow around this idea that the Make America Great Again essence is something of an evolution of the disenfranchised Rust Belt manufacturing worker and this angry dude bro, and at the same time expressing many of the things that are long overdue in America, which is fiscal responsibility, a secure border, and a non-interventionist foreign policy where we don't meddle in other people's affairs to our own undoing.
Yes. I would say that's probably another part of it, especially if you look at the disastrous Afghanistan conflict. 20 years, 2,400 American servicemen dead, 20,000 wounded, only to have the Taliban not only back in power, but controlling more of the country and with better weaponry this time around. And blunders such as that, and when you look at the Rust Belt, mentioning NAFTA earlier, and how the manufacturing sector, I guess I can understand a lot of those people feel betrayed. And really is what happened when you look at it on a bigger picture. It was to save the fat cats a couple bucks. One case is when I was in upstate New York, there was this Greek American diner in Troy I like to dine at. And the ice cream machine, the grill, the coffee maker, everything was made in the late 40s right there in Troy, New York, and it still worked perfectly. And had they been using equipment that was made in China or the Philippines or Mexico at a cheaper rate, it would not be working in pristine condition like it was when it was made in America. That's often what I've noticed. Stuff that's made here typically does last. We all know someone who's got a 1975 refrigerator still running in the basement. And
Yeah, and well, that was probably before the companies figured out that forced obsolescence, right,
Mhm.
is good for the bottom line because you keep needing to make new versions of
Right.
products, and you need to keep
Because the store.
cranking the newest, latest, best one out there.
Exactly, because the owner of that diner was born 1961 and his father bought the equipment in 1948. So it was before his time. It's never going obsolete. And now his daughter, who took over, is using the same equipment. So someone must have realized, hey, we can make a lot more money if this is going to break every 2 years.
And in ways, that's kind of a paradigm for our youth.
Hmm.
So as we both probably regret, a host of missed opportunities from both sides of the political aisle, not just one of them.
Right.
And now we're in a state of frenetic, manic transformation. Personally, I think good stuff and bad stuff are going to shake out of this. But for the sake of this conversation, what's your hopes and dreams and aspiration for yourself as a millennial, of evolving eventually and maturing eventually into what would be the equivalent of boomer status is now? And then, what's your feeling about your generation overall in terms of being able to catch up and figure it out?
Well, what I would say is the best way we could even sell that to catching up is they don't realize, and I didn't realize this either until I was able to work from home, what a great lifestyle I was missing out on. See, I live in downtown Chicago. And we've got nightclubs, bars here that are open into the wee hours of the day where you can go out, meet new people. There's really a lot to do. And you can even go out on a work day. I come in at 5 o'clock in the morning. I walk from my bed to my desk. And a lot of the people who I meet there, it's usually a woman majority from what I've noticed. There's fewer and fewer males in social settings, and most of them work from home as well, and or some are still in school. And that's one of the rewards. See, now you can go out more, you can be more flexible, you don't have to worry about the difficulties. Like when I'm working from home, a year ago I was delivering Lou Malnati's. Now, I'm eating a Lou Malnati's, I'm working, I'm messaging my friend in Turkey. It's much more laid back that way. And really, what I would encourage, because for a lot of people my age, I think we're growing older. But for the younger generation, I would definitely say get to college, do as much as the school offers, look at the billboards, everything, see what internships are available. There were a lot that I missed during my college years, which I regret. But as I said, slow learner, better late than never. And definitely socialize. I would say unplug from the matrix, because for a lot of individuals my age, we're getting to that age where it's just too late. We're at that cusp where we can't change our minds anymore. I noticed that with a lot of people around this age, they stopped listening to new music, they stopped watching new shows, they've kind of become set in their ways. So we can get some out, but I think generally right now it would be much better to focus on the next generation that's coming up because they're also going to be less numerous. So we do have a chance to start over and get it right. And we had a lot of mistakes. We made a lot of mistakes. And we can learn from our mistakes and teach it to the next age group over because I feel they also have a much better understanding of technology than we did. I got to watch technology evolve, not just video games, but computers go from, those big clunky boob tube television sets to flat screens. It happened in my lifetime. And kids nowadays, I watch cell phones go from those big battery phones like that kid from Saved by the Bell had to fit in your pocket iPhones that can do everything. So I think with the next generation, definitely there is a lot of potential because they're much more primed. They have a better understanding of the tech and they can learn from us because my generation seems to have fumbled so badly in so many areas.
And, based on our conversation, it's not your fault
Hmm.
because you've been blindsided by the Matrix,
Yes.
and the economy often has been in a tailspin because there
Yes.
have been some bubbles bursting really at salient points and milestones in your emotional development.
Yes, in my
So,
lifetime, we watched the dot-com bubble burst. We watched the housing financial crisis. It was mad. We watched the bailouts and the subsequent problems. The economy, yeah, as long as I have been aware of economics, has not been stable. I can say that much. Not for long, at least.
yep. So you guys got the taste of the real dynamic uncertainty
Hmm.
of an America, an American culture, and American politics in not only flux, but I think now we've officially entered revolution. So, it's quite a change. I do sense a Pollyanna and highly positive attitude and outlook, though, in just about everything you've said. You're
Yes.
not a doom and gloomer. You're not like it's this. You're not Chicken Little. The
No.
sky's not falling. It's not the end of
No.
democracy. It's
I'm
not.
much more in Steven Pinker's camp when it comes to optimism.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up, which is everything does seem rather dire. And to just give listeners a little bit of background, Steven Pinker is the Harvard neuroscientist who has written several books, which basically illustrate through data that the human species has never in its entire history been doing as well. Level of overall global education, health, employment, assets are at record levels. And again, despite blips, which are obvious,
Mhm.
from a statistical point of view, we have never been happier, healthier, and doing better.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's in contrast to our news cycle, which is clickbait cannibalism
oh
of that
yes,
attitude.
very much. And it was also organizations, we once thought were respectable, like CNN, kind of sold themselves out when they gave the Donald, hours of free advertising because they figured, this will make for a good story. More stories means more ad revenue, means more viewers, means more ratings, means more money. It's an endless cycle. So, of
Yeah,
course,
and it's created the efficacy of the troll. So
yes.
if you are a troll, you will skyrocket in terms of attention. And to points that everyone from recently Chris Hayes and Ezra Klein and folks all over the political spectrum are making, attention is the new commodity. It's the new gold is attention. And if
Oh,
you're a troll, you're gonna get attention. Elon Musk figured it out and might have been the reason he bought Twitter, just
very
to
much.
command attention.
And I was going to say there is actually a good side to that. Some pages I follow where you've got like a single activist running a page where they get trolled a lot by right wing trolls and whatnot. Actually, this one lady, she posts the money that she gets from Facebook for engagement, and it's like 3,500, 2,400 last month. And she says, the trolls, you guys can keep on coming. You're just making me money. And so, that can be used for both good and bad because engagement does pay, clicks pay, views pay, ad revenue. It's very much, all advertising is good advertising. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's basically our current president's modus operandi. I have found ranting on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube that my posts go viral in two ways, ways that are often complementary of each other, which is number one, it appeals to an established community of people who embrace the content and then share it. That's number one.
Right.
And number two is it engenders a powerful negative response, which precipitates the same kind of behavior. So as long as you're triggering people, irrespective of the vector of that triggering, it can be triggered good or it's triggered bad. You just need the triggering. You need to get a reaction and sustain a
Exactly.
reaction to be noticed, to be shared, and to gain attention and sustain it. So Musk knows this, Trump knows this. I think the Democrats need to learn this if they
Mm.
want to, come back to power.
Oh, they
But
do.
regardless of your partisanship or your political persuasion,
Mm.
these are universals, just like you mentioned. We're in an information age, and morality is kind of out the window and it's been substituted by eyeballs.
Very much so. I mean, I remember during his first campaign, I don't think I saw a Trump commercial until mid October of 2016. That was when he finally asked the RNC for some spending cash. And I'm thinking, why is there even a commercial? All this free advertising from CNN, from Fox. And and with Fox, it goes back. I think I showed you that video from maybe when they were 3 or 4 years old. Bill O'Reilly had the Insane Clown Posse on, and he was saying, "Are your kids listening to this music?" And the guys came on the show dressed in clown attire, and he's showing footage of a signing they did where there's maybe 7 or 8 kids. It was somewhere in Metro Chicago, I know that, and after that interview, their popularity skyrocketed because I don't doubt, all those parents watching Fox News went to their kids' room. Billy, do not listen to Insane Clown Posse. Billy had no idea who that stupid group was. And then, word got out. That's pretty much, that was an early example, and that was at the dawn of the internet. So nowadays,
Yeah, yeah. I'm planning on publishing my second book. It's a science fiction odyssey. And the best thing that could possibly happen would be for people to ban it. And that way I'll get a little bit of attention, which is the irony and paradox of censorship
mhm.
overall. That you
Yeah.
shut somebody down and all of a sudden you're calling attention to it. And I think that's a fitting way to put a capper on our conversation, which is the hopefulness that you express about the millennials in general and the millennial male in particular. They're a generation that has been shut down, both voluntarily and involuntarily, both consciously and unconsciously. Millennials and millennial men have been shut down by video games and the digital world that has sucked them in. Millennials have been shut down by the loss of business opportunities, the ability to buy a house, job prospects. And millennials have been shut down by the uncertainties of the American economy and the constant oscillations between the two parties and the ever polarizing ideologies. But that doesn't necessarily mean, to your point, that it's hopeless, that the shutdown could precipitate its own rebirth. And I think that that's an optimistic way to look at it, and hopefully a way out.
Yes, and I've always been the optimist because in some points in life, optimism is all you have, and I'm also a strong believer in having high morale and courage. Like one of my favorite quotes is from Arlie Ermy in Full Metal Jacket: Private Joker is ignorant and he's silly, but he's got guts, and guts is enough." And that is what I've always lived by.
Yeah, you're a writer. You're not a killer.
That's right.
Uh, or I think it was the other way around. You're a killer. You're not a writer.
One of the two, and I think he became both.
Right, right. So I think that's a great way to put a cap on it, which is
Definitely.
cheers to you, Ivor, for overcoming the millennial malaise.
Thank you. And I
And
really, what I want is for all millennials to overcome it. All of us.
yeah, and you guys have been given a hard time, I think, because
Yes.
when you stereotype or label a people, then you de facto encourage them to live up to the expectations of your negative opinion. This is
Exactly.
so common. And the millennial stereotype that as a boomer I've been familiar with is, you guys are whiny and lazy and
Mm.
spoiled. And, we, as boomers, we grew up with a brass spoon in our mouth, and you guys have a platinum one. You take everything for granted, and
Yes.
it's all your fault. And I think you dispel the notion very convincingly that millennials suck, which is you guys have been handed a bum hand, and there's some deep rooted struggle that is everyone's fault. But at the same time, there's a hopeful way out of that malaise, which
Yes.
is no different from any other generation's hopefulness and hard work and positive attitude, which is stay frisky, stay flexible, learn new things, don't give up, and take a positive attitude toward yourself and society instead of wallowing in a lot of the negativity, which has become sadly pervasive.
Yes. Sadly. And, I would just tell people, and, it's what I've told a lot of my dude bro friends or guys who have regressed into that. Uh, Once again, own decision. I say, maybe stop watching podcasts for a little while. Turn the podcasts off.
I think that's the best way to end our podcast
Yes, it is.
conversation. So,
Brilliant
yeah. So,
timing.
so thank you so much, Ivor. We
Oh,
can bring you back on in 6 months or a year to see how
oh,
you're doing, to see
definitely.
how society's faring in these revolutionary times,
Definitely.
and kudos to you for overcoming adversity and doing what you think you can do to make your life and society a better place for all of us.
Oh, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my views.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And thanks for listening to the Bald Ambition podcast. Until later, this is Mookie Spitz signing off. Thanks, Ivor.
Welcome.